is Kylie Fay and I'm the CEO of the Institute of Quarrying Australia. Before I formally introduce our presenter, Sean Taylor, Komatsu's CEO and Managing Director, I just want to provide a little bit of background and context of what led us here this evening. I'll start by acknowledging the international presidents of all our global IQs, Martin Riley from the UK, Shane Brady, Australia, Dean Torstensen, New Zealand, Nyung Chen, Hong Kong, Lazarus Meko, South Africa, and Lee Kam Fat, Malaysia. And Mr. Lee has recently retired after 18 proud years serving the Malaysian Institute. I'd also like to acknowledge all the fellows of the institutes who are on the webinar today and recognise their contribution to their global institutes and the industry at large. Interestingly, this is our first global presentation that's delivered by all IQs in collaboration. And I think it's a very fitting topic that we're talking about diversity and inclusion. Also of note is the presenter, Sean, is our 2020 winner of the Caernarfon Award. The Caernarfon Award is presented to an individual that the international presidents recognise for a presentation that's been delivered at either branch or conference level that they believe has really pushed the industry and improved the industry. Sean presented the Say Again campaign in 2019 at the Institute of Quarrying Australia's conference in Geelong. And the presentation on the day was extremely well received. It created an enormous buzz. And following the conference, there was ongoing requests for the presentation from all parts of our industry, from suppliers and our quarrying professionals. On the back of this interest, the IQA nominated Sean for the Caernarfon Award, and we're very proud to have him as the 2020 winner. And Sean has graciously agreed to present our Say Again campaign for us today. So our award winner and our presenter, Mr. Sean Taylor.
Great, thanks Kylie. I really appreciate that introduction, and hello from down under in Sydney. It's 6 o'clock in the evening here. Thanks for joining us in the various time zones all around the world. Really appreciate it. Of course, when I normally speak to people in the quarry industry, it's more about Komatsu machines and the great work done by our people in supporting our customers. But I know you already know that, so at least I hope you do. So today I'm going to spend the next 20 or so minutes and talk about inclusion and diversity. And it's a bit more difficult over video to create a buzz, but I think it's a really important subject. So I'll do my best to talk about and to get across sort of the vibe of what we talked about in Geelong back at the Institute of Quarrying Australia National Conference last year. Look, it's a really important topic for business leaders, but more specifically leaders of industrial male-dominated companies like Komatsu, and probably a lot of the companies on this webinar. And inclusion and diversity has always been important, of course, but I would suggest today it's more critical than ever. And my aim in this short presentation is to touch on why this is so and talk about some of the simple things that we have done or are planning to do at Komatsu Australia to kind of move that needle. And look, I'm by no means putting Komatsu Australia out there as a shining light. Indeed, we are very much a work in progress, as I suspect most of your companies are. So I will concentrate in this presentation on gender diversity, but of course I acknowledge that inclusion and diversity is much, much broader. There are many dimensions, and each of those dimensions require proactive actions in their own right. And whilst as leaders we have to tackle all of these dimensions simultaneously, the simple truth is female representation is so bad that I feel if we can achieve better gender diversity in industrial companies, the impact will simply be huge. And surely we can engage, 50% of the population better. And perhaps when we do that, some of the unique qualities that women bring to the table will in turn help us have a better conversation on the other dimensions, the broader topics of inclusion and diversity as well. So how does any company or industry transition from the old way to the new way? Very simply, leaders must see the change as important and drive that change. And I'll say that again because really it's the most critical point of my presentation. Leaders must see the change as important and drive that change. There's no other way, really. It won't happen by itself, particularly for industrial companies like ours. But I've got to tell you, unfortunately, it hasn't happened. It hasn't progressed. Indeed, we've gone a little bit backwards, if anything, and I'll show you some of the stats shortly. I was a bit amazed by that when I was researching this topic last year, because almost every seminar I attend, every management magazine I read, almost every company board report I study, they're all talking about more gender diversity and its importance. So I was amazed that we really haven't moved forward. But recognising this fact that we haven't moved forward, Elizabeth Broderick founded the Male Champions of Change here in Australia. And Male Champions of Change works with influential leaders to redefine men's roles in acting on gender equality. So it activates peer groups of male leaders and supports them to step up beside women and drive the adoption of actions across the private sector and government. And a couple of years ago, we formed what I would like to call an industrial subcommittee of that group in Australia. Now, our group meets about 4 times a year, and we've got Australian CEOs of companies like Cummins Engines, Komatsu, obviously, Hanson or Heidelberg Cement outside Australia, and several other industrial and construction companies. So in that respect, we have got a great opportunity, I felt, to influence the entire construction value chain, and that's really exciting. And it recognises the fact that if we keep approaching this issue in the same way, we will continue to have no impact. And once again, I do not say Komatsu Australia is doing any better in this area. We are in exactly the same boat as most of the companies in our industry, suppliers, producers of construction materials, and constructors themselves. But, you know, people are at the heart of innovation. And if people are at the heart of innovation, or if we think having more innovation is important, which I think everybody does, then we have to solve people issues as well, not just technology issues. Of course, we all want to work in fair and inclusive companies. It's just more fun coming to work when we do. But for those not treated fairly or inclusively, it isn't fun at all. Indeed, it can be very toxic. Actually, in these cases, we're talking in some cases about basic human rights and even legal rights. And as leaders, we know we have very important obligations. For example, in our industry, you know, we're very focused on health and safety, and we're all becoming very well aware, particularly during this pandemic, of the importance of mental health too. And that goes to the heart of some of the issues we're talking about. Okay, so having a safe, inclusive and diverse workplace, it's fairer, it's a legal requirement, and it's actually more fun to be part of. So the really simple question I asked a couple of years ago, why isn't this reason enough for us to move the needle? And again, I'm not preaching. I've been in, you know, as Kylie said, I've been in the construction business over 30 years, and I'm one of many in my generation who actually haven't done anything about it. I blame myself. We just took it for granted, actually, that women didn't want to join our industry. And for those that did, well, you know, maybe they should adopt to us, you know, shouldn't they? You know, there are many people in my company, even women in my company, and I'm sure people on this webinar believe that, you know, this is a bit of political correctness or potentially echoes of the Me Too movement. But something else, you know, fundamentally has changed, and that's driving us, which in my view is vitally important to our discussion on diversity, and that is to this slide. The rate of technology and innovation is accelerating. Look, it's not new, it's just getting exponentially faster, and that is both a huge risk and a huge opportunity. I think it's a really big risk for industrial companies where traditional barriers to entry have been very high. And it is a big risk to industrial companies who can suddenly find data as important as their products. And it is a great opportunity for middle players who can use this to disrupt, you know, our 100-year industry, our 100-year plus business models, or competitors who somehow learn to innovate faster than we can. In the construction industry, for example, disruptive innovation could come in the form of doubling or even tripling productivity, which has been, we've all got to admit, has been really elusive in the end-to-end construction process, certainly compared to manufacturing, and I come from a manufacturing company as well. Of course, new technology and tools are really, really important. After all, that's what, Komatsu does. But I would argue people in organisational structures are equally so. Indeed, that has been exactly my experience rolling out over 230 Komatsu autonomous mining trucks in Western Australia, for example. Frankly, my biggest takeaway of working on, I would say, it's probably not as well known as it should be, but I would say the largest autonomous vehicle project in the world over the last 10 years. And the incredible irony is that, taking drivers out of trucks, the whole change process is actually all about people, surprisingly. So in this new world we are creating, there will be companies that disrupt and those that will be disrupted. Whilst the tried and true ways of the past made us successful, they are no longer the predictor of future success. Komatsu itself is 100 years old next year, but we have to adapt to change too. A hierarchy of all male engineers, or all female engineers for that matter, is just not going to cut it. So diverse teams that challenge the status quo, give different points of view, and teams that collaborate as a matter of course will be much faster in bringing new ideas, adapting to change and upskilling themselves. So I put it to you that diversity in this is a key platform. It's a key tool to build an innovative culture. And this is perhaps another answer to why diversity. Fairness, frankly, should be enough, but it hasn't been. But an innovative culture directly drives business results and even survival going forward. So it seems to me that supporting diversity is really one of the easier decisions for management to make these days. As I've said, despite being fair, despite driving innovation, we've not done a great job in terms of gender diversity. That's the reality. There are certainly more women in the workforce, that's true, but is that all that matters? Well, we often talk about the glass ceiling for women to move into senior management roles, and that's true. But we also seem to have this glass wall between different industries and departments within different companies. In fact, we're kind of seeing that in the COVID world with unemployment statistics around female being higher in those industries. So for whatever reason, industries like retail, medical, education seem to attract more women, whereas industrial companies like ours and in the quarry industry don't seem to be able to do as well. Even within the company's functional areas, if a woman does magically get into Komatsu or one of our companies, women seem to be in that HR, finance, legal and marketing areas. There's a much higher proportion there than versus the operational line roles or the profit centres in the business. So it seems it is difficult to create a culture where women are accepted and want to join, our male-dominated companies. And I want to talk about that a bit more. These are some of the statistics. A study, this is Australian statistics, but I've got some UK as well. The study was completed in various industries in Australia based on the percentage of female employees. It goes for 20 years, 98 to 2018. And it looked at basically male-dominated industries, those industries where female representation was less than 40%. And looking at this data, there's a few takeaways. One, none of the industries have improved as much as I expected, given the focus over the last 20 years to my point before. We've been talking about this for so long. Although mining, it's interesting, you look at the mining numbers, has had an impressive move, at least in Australia, in a quick time. And, I see that in the mining industry in Australia in particular. But even having said that, the other takeaway is construction and mining still have the lowest female participation of any industry in Australia. construction and transport, transport is a large part of the quarry business, have less female participation in 2018 than they did in 1998. So, we're not improving. The same data, I went onto the internet today, the same data is available in the UK, for example, and it's no better. Almost a mirror image, actually, which actually isn't surprising, I guess, to anybody. For example, female participation in the UK construction industry was at a little bit over 12% in 2007 and is at 11% in 2018. So we're not moving forward. Indeed, we are standing still. But despite standing still, we are an industry of continuous improvement. We're engineers. We pride ourselves on that. We're technical companies at heart. We examine data and we do know how to make change where the will is there. So perhaps, though, we just need to understand that a culture of diversity and inclusion is actually as important as improving, things like productivity and or even the bottom line or even safety, for example. We can then be serious about devising and implementing concrete activities. Sorry for the pun, but that's the idea. The good news, I believe, is that there is some really good practice and policies that we can adopt which will have a direct and immediate impact. And we're starting to experiment with some of those things at Komatsu. Each one by itself may not have the profile of winning a major client from a sales point of view or significantly reducing cost at a marginal quarry. But I believe collectively they will drive a diverse and inclusive culture. And in turn, that will have a far greater impact on a sustainable business for the longer term. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about strategic change. I think industrial companies need to take this seriously and share ideas. And that is why I joined Male Champions of Change. I wanted to specifically focus on companies like mine, industrial male-dominated companies. That's why I agreed to speak at the Quarry Conference in Geelong, and I've agreed to speak on this webinar because I think industrial male-dominated companies, we are at the heart of making this change, and it really requires the leaders of those businesses to see this as important. So again, I'm not putting Komatsu Australia up there at all, but here are some ideas that we are exploring. The status quo, we have to change it, obviously. The status quo cannot change if entry-level recruitment simply reflects the same gender diversity as our existing employees. Mathematically, it doesn't work. We can never improve. For example, we have to find a way to attract and select female graduates, and in my case, and I think many of your businesses, trade apprentices. We should be targeting 30 to 50% females, not 10 to 15%. 10 to 15% reflects the status quo. It reflects the old way of doing things. It reflects the workforce we have today. At Komatsu, we can achieve this actually with our graduate intakes for some reason. Perhaps more broadly, we're doing a better job in that space. Society is attracting probably more women to STEM. We need mechanical, mechatronic, mining, civil engineers, data scientists these days. And actually, I noted on the UK statistics, again, for example, using the UK as another example, the female professional engineers have doubled to 58,000 between 2013 and 2018. So maybe there's some momentum being created in the professional engineering space, which is fantastic. But where we do struggle is at this entry level is attracting a large enough number of female applicants for our trades and for our trade apprenticeships. So, for Komatsu Australia, my last year's intake of first-year apprentices, we accepted, I think, about 70 applicants. We had 6,500 applications, which was just amazing, out of which there was 588 young women. Not a huge number, but, that's enough. Even then, I couldn't persuade my organisation because I don't step in and select these people. Even then, I couldn't, get them to go to 50% females. I couldn't really work that out, given that this was an entry-level position where really experience is not a factor. But nevertheless, we did better than we did the year before. We got 12 females, and we out of the 70-odd new apprentices were female. This year for apprentices starting in 2021, in January 2021, I've managed to maybe move a bit further forward with our team, and probably I've been a little bit more prescriptive about it, but I feel I have to. And 29 females out of a total of 57 new apprentices coming into the organisation in January will be females. So I think we've got to proactively target these entry-level positions to 30 to 50% to be females. Otherwise, we can never move the needle. And that's my main point on changing the status quo. And how do we do that? We have to promote our business in a better way. And I think it is an important point for all of us, I guess we call ourselves the old economy companies maybe. Actually, it's equally important, not just for attracting good young women in the business these days, but, young men as well. This is the world we live in. So my goal at Komatsu Australia is not only to compete for talented people with some of the great, companies in the construction and the mining industry, but also within the broader Australian economy. Even the Googles, the Amazons, the investment banks. I want Komatsu to be a more viable and attractive first choice for young people, no matter the gender. Because in reality, it is at Komatsu, it's a great business at Komatsu. And we must do a better job at marketing the huge range of experiences that are available in all of our companies. When you go through all of those experiences, it's incredible. We just don't do a very good job at marketing that. For example, Komatsu is a global manufacturing company. It's at the leading edge of technology in many, many areas. We own several very successful technology-based companies, all of which have huge Australian as well as global footprints. And we provide the tools which are literally at the foundation of building our society. This is a great company to be part of. And I know all of your companies out there have got similar stories, and we've just got to get out there and talk about that. So I think, this is exciting and cool. I think our construction industry is exciting and cool, but we haven't done a great job of convincing the next generation. And this time around, there's a lot more competition. We have to do a better job. To attract, more women in our industry, we've got to challenge those stereotypes. I started talking about that a little bit. I'm sure you can all name them, within our industry, or at least within your company. Women have got to believe that they can be successful and have meaningful careers in an inclusive culture that doesn't leave them as the odd one out in a boardroom of 10 men or a workshop of 30 mechanics. One comment I hear a lot is that women have to be able to adapt to the male-dominated workshop culture. I am sorry, I just cannot accept that. The same men in the workshop seem to manage just fine in every other part of their lives where they interact with 50% of the population. And I have seen workshops be very, very inclusive when faced with other challenges around diversity. Indeed, empathy between team members in a close-knit workshop is to be really, truly admired. One critical line role, in my business, for example, is the branch manager. This is the most senior role within a branch or depot and controls the aftermarket support for Komatsu customers within its vicinity. I'm sure a few of you are familiar with that. We have over 50 branches in Australia and New Zealand. And in the past, this has always been a trade-related person that has been promoted, has come through the business, all were men. And we've started to challenge this stereotype to try to understand what attributes are really important for this type of role. And cut the story short, it turns out that leadership and communication are actually the most critical attributes. This is not to downplay the importance of technical experience, but technical experience is something that is more accessible than it was in the past, given technology, which means a non-trade qualified branch manager can obtain the right technical advice very quickly to enable rapid support to our customers. So, in this selection process, we are trying to be more aware of, we call it this merit trap. something I hear often is we should always select the best person for the job. And of course that is correct. Why in your right mind would you do anything other than pick the best person for the job? My suggestion, though, is to more carefully consider the actual criteria for that best person and broaden the selection criteria, broaden the selection panel, broaden the short list to get a more balanced decision. Unconscious bias, it's called unconscious for a reason. And we're trying to formally look at ways to make this clear in our selection and recruitment process at Komatsu. Targets. Our industry loves targets. Targets are important because we know if we don't measure something, it is obviously, it's not important. We had a lot of discussion around this at Komatsu. And one of the first things I was encouraged to do when I became a male champion of change was to conduct listening and learning forums, not only from women, but also men in the business. In those sessions, I learned a huge amount, a lot of things I thought I knew. But in terms of targets, I learned from women, particularly senior, very successful women in my business, that they did not want to be part of a culture where men turned around and said, look, she only got the job because she was a woman. They don't want a bar of that. And I totally understand that. It's like winning a grand final, but being called, a cheat or something. This is quite sensitive, of course, at the moment for both men and women. My view is we do have an overall company target. It's 21% at the moment. That's what we're trying for. But it shouldn't be a quota. We do promote or hire based on the best person for the role, but we also regularly reconsider how we attract and select the best people. Finally, I would hope men who feel challenged by a quota or target, don't be. Women can easily counter any argument that we have based on an uneven playing ground, whether it's 15%, 21%, or even 30% female participation in our industry. The playground is still well and truly in men's favour. I do think that there could be some momentum achieved by getting a company like mine, I think companies like yours, into that 20+% range. I think we will start to really get some progress when we do that. For example, 80% of my employees are operational or technically based employees. So it will necessitate opening up more of these roles to females, and that will be a huge change for us, and it will create momentum. I've talked a lot about the workshop, but not much about that other layer, which is, that senior leadership, that boardroom. Full disclosure, only 10% of my senior leadership team are women. My excuse is I have a very well-established and high-performing team. If I were to sack one of them or move one of them sideways to accommodate women, I think I would put gender diversity actually back 5 years in my business. More importantly, if respect is a key attribute of a diverse and inclusive culture, not respecting your current leadership team is not a good way to go. And ultimately, it defeats the purpose. It doesn't make sense. And so this is a dilemma, because I absolutely know that a more diverse senior leadership team will equip the company to make better decisions. And I often have to think about that and who I invite to some of the senior leadership team meetings to get that point of view so we make balanced decisions. Look, there are some building blocks that companies like mine and what we're trying to start with to make a change to this glass ceiling business. I need to take more chances within middle management, things, people like branch managers and other roles. 2, I need to prepare women to step up and apply for these roles when they do become available, to have the confidence to step forward, that they will be heard and they will be treated fairly through the recruitment process, which of course, women will be able to step up eventually, even for the, definitely for the CEO's role as well. And we have to think about fast tracking experience for some of our women in these middle management positions. 3, we definitely have, as I've said before, put our recruiting companies on notice that absolutely we need a candidate shortlist to be 40% plus female. Do not present a shortlist to me for a senior position that doesn't have 40% females or 40% males for that matters for senior roles. And really importantly within the company, I've updated the parental leave, the flexible work policies within the business. And I feel that this will help women see that having children and having a career at Komatsu are not mutually exclusive. And finally, I need to ensure, of course, that there is no pay disparity between men and women. These are some simple actions that I believe will lead to change and help me with this dilemma around driving change in the boardroom as well. Look, I'm almost done, but I want to finish on, with 2 quick points on value and 1 point, something very, very basic, and there's a little bit of a video on that as well. But nevertheless, probably the most important behaviour, I think, for creating a diverse and inclusive company. This concept of Gemba, it's a Japanese one. Komatsu, we're a Japanese company. It's about making a difference. This usually resonates with our customers at the point of where real value is created, making a difference at a point where real value is created. And Gemba is something that really drives a company like Komatsu, whether it's total quality management, TQM, lean manufacturing at the factory production line, or it's the productivity of our equipment, at a quarry or a mine site. The Komatsu way is really to visualise and interpret the data, apply the plan, do, check, act until we see sustainable change happening at the point where it makes a difference, the Gemba. So in terms of inclusion and diversity, as I've said, we've not applied this very well. And I think we represent many industrial companies that have failed in the same way. So I hope we can turn that around, because I believe a more diverse team will harvest and increasingly build the productivity of our business going forward. So even though we've got some actions in place, we're going to have to keep re-looking at those actions, because if we don't start moving that needle, we've got to come up with new actions. We've got to understand what needs to change in the parental leave policy, what needs to change in the flexible work policy. How do we need to encourage middle management in a better way? We've got to do that. So related to Gemba, of course, is the idea of collaboration, and some of the problems we're facing, for example, productivity in the construction industry is really tough. And to be honest, I don't think any one of us individually, any part of the sector, is going to fix those issues. I don't think governments are going to fix it. I don't think construction companies are going to fix it. I don't think construction material companies in the quarry industry are going to fix it. I don't think even machinery manufacturing companies like mine are going to solve some of the issues that we have in terms of the productivity of our industry unless we collaborate a lot more across those businesses. And the problem is just too hard and complex. So more and more I feel that my team is driven by a sense of purpose, and improvement of that construction industry is a great sense of purpose. And there's no better way of doing that than working together for a common goal. So I think, collaborative teams are the future organisational structure we need to adopt. Collaborative teams are the future organisational structure. And I think if that is the case, then diversity and inclusion is absolutely a critical building block to do this. So finally, just something really basic to finish off on, and maybe a starting point. It was certainly our starting point, and I think it's a great starting point for any company wanting to start this journey. When I started this journey, I did a lot of these listen and learn sessions with diversity, with men and women in the business. And it was hard for me in many ways because, I'm a male, white, came through the engineering schools. I really didn't see this. I didn't see it. I hadn't experienced it. I had to really listen carefully to understand the negative impacts it was having on many of my team. And everyday sexism, and that's what we're talking about from a basic point of view, is a real pervasive threat to a diverse and inclusive culture. And most of the time, men are not aware that they have said something hurtful or maybe disrespectful. Whilst at the other end of the spectrum, comments, may well be designed to be hurtful and put somebody down. And the actions when that happens are quite different, obviously, and have to be treated harshly. But, perhaps isolated cases are not the issue, but over many years, they build up. And one of the things I learned from speaking to the people in my organisation is that, particularly women that have been in the organisation for many years, they developed, kind of an armour. They took it, they accepted it. No one really stood up to defend them, so they really had no choice. And, most of them were kind of innocuous, not so serious, potentially, bit of a joke here or a bit of there. And, over the years, you move on, you get through it, I guess. But what I wasn't aware of really is how much that actually built up in terms of and how it impacted on many of the female employees in my organisation. And that hurt me, actually. So say again as a campaign to not let potentially hurtful comments slip through unchallenged. In the case of everyday sexism, we particularly want men to call out their own comments or other men's comments so women don't have to. Let's step up. We don't want this to be particularly controversial. We don't want this to be confrontational. We've all grown up in different environments. And most of the time when we're talking about things like everyday sexism, we're probably not aware that something we've said could be hurtful. But I've got to tell you, that doesn't change the fact that it is hurtful. And we've got to understand that. So certainly what we do believe is that there is a basic foundation to an inclusive and diverse workplace. And I kind of think about it in the same light as PPE, personal protective equipment for safety. This is kind of a basic thing that we in industrial companies can sort out today. And then we can move forward to some of the other things that I talked about. So let me finish with a video that my leadership and my team put together. Hopefully the technology works. I want to thank you for listening, and I do hope this reinforces or helps some of you to make that next step on the inclusion and diversity journey. So thank you.
Everyone counts as a catch cry for how we want to make the business better. So we want to be a business that focuses on our people and ensuring that we've got diversity of opinion, that we're hearing the voices of everybody, and that we're giving our employees and potential employees the best opportunity to succeed at Komatsu.
It's a fundamental part of inclusion. And if we're to make people feel included, we have to ensure that people feel welcome, they feel valued, and they feel respected.
In reality, everyone does count. When you get differences in the workplace, that creates a lot of opportunity, and opportunity leads to better thinking. So that's a great outcome for Komatsu.
I think everybody should have an opportunity to contribute to the business. Everybody, importantly, should have an opportunity to reach their capability and level of contribution that they're comfortable with.
If we want to get the best ideas out of our people, we need to make it an environment where they feel free to share those ideas. And the best ideas, I think, come from people with a broad range of experience and a broad range of backgrounds.
Through the Say Again campaign, we have the opportunity to think twice about how we talk to our teammates.
Just having that way of being a little bit more relaxed and friendly to start challenging some of those unintended norms or processes that might be out there, I think is a great way to do it.
It's not a way of punishing anyone or everyone, it's just an awareness program to make sure that they're aware of what they're saying or doing. The little things, they might need to adjust what they're saying.
It's not to treat us as robots, it's simply a reminder that we are all humans, that we all work together, that we should respect that.
It's a nice way for us all to get that little wake-up call and think about what we say before it comes out of our mouths.
You know, one of the best things we did was earlier in the campaign was to sit down and talk to all of the women in the business and to a lot of the men and talk about this in a serious way. And I really learnt a lot about what was happening potentially in the company. Yeah, I was really surprised about how much everyday sexism was happening. And that took me by surprise, actually.
Most of the time, people will just let it pass. As a manager, you can see that it does affect people down the track, or if it happens quite frequently, it can affect people's self-esteem, their morale, and obviously productivity as well in the workplace.
Quite often it's the little things that chip away at different people. It's the little things and little comments that are made that actually affect people, and it actually leads to less productivity in the workplace because it puts stress on people. It creates a mental health issue within the business as well.
Imagine if we can get the best out of all of our 3,100 employees at last count. Imagine where we can take this company. Because if we keep doing the same things in the same way, we will eventually fail. And I don't want to see this company fail. So from a business point of view, diversity and inclusion is absolutely as essential as, our market share out there in the market.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that, Sean. I've been getting quite a few questions that have been popping in, a few on the overall chat, and some ones just sent to me directly. So we might just run through a few of those if that's okay. Look, I think there's been a few that are around a similar sort of theme, and that's of any tips or experience of where you may encounter either a customer or internally of individuals that aren't as progressed in this thinking, and some language that's come in as, those with old school thought. How have you sort of encouraged them to get on the journey and, really respond and adapt to inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, it's still a journey that we're going through. It's, an organisation like ours, a big organisation, we've got many layers. One of our learnings, I think, is that we put this video out, we put this program out last year, and we talked about it from a leadership point of view quite seriously. But it really, our lesson was, it just didn't penetrate through the layers of the organisation. And, in Australia, we've got a lot of very remote locations where there might be one or two women in a place where there's 20 men, for example. And what was happening is the campaign, even though it's a strong campaign, wasn't penetrating as much as we would like. So our learning really, and what we're trying this year more, is how we take that conversation down and talk to the branch managers, talk to the leading hands, talk to the people that are, directly leading the workforce at a line level about this. So I think that's the way you've got to go. You can't just put out a program like this and expect it to work, because for one thing, there's a natural, in some cases there can be a natural negativity towards it. So you've got to build that coalition. You've got to build that momentum in the organisation. It's a start, but you're definitely going to still get the guys out there that feel that this is, politically correct and all the rest of it. And the aim is not to change their minds, to be honest. I don't want to change their minds because I probably can't. But I do want them to be more respectful in the workplace, and I do want them to be thinking about that. And particularly when they're a leader, leading young women in their business, and as you saw from my apprenticeship numbers, the young ladies are coming into their business, and so actually this campaign protects them as well. It protects those guys from potentially getting too far offline into something far more serious. So that's why that's what, in some ways, what I would say to some of the guys that are potentially not going to change their minds.
Thank you. And a couple of questions have come in around attraction and retention, and particularly sort of, steps to attract diversity. But how's Komatsu created that inclusivity to keep diverse recruits? And particularly a couple of questions of those females coming in at those entry-level roles in operational roles.
Well, one, you've got to make a safe workplace. So, it's kind of like Maslow's theory of needs. You've got to have a safe workplace. You can't physically hurt somebody and you can't mentally hurt somebody. So you need a safe workplace. So you need a culture that's accepting of a young lady or a woman coming into the business, and they're going to feel safe in that environment, both physically and mentally. And they're going to feel that they're included. So that's number one. The next thing I think is really important is then creating a buzz, a hype, a purpose for the business. And I think technology and innovation, and that's why I talk a lot about it, even though it seems to be a different subject, but that's why I talk a lot about it in this area, because I think if you can do that, you create this sense of purpose, this sense of future and sense of direction, and it really helps to, drive that retention through the business. And that really helps diversity, because not only do you bring in, the females into the organisation through the entry level, but they then want to stay in the organisation. One of the metrics that you have to be very careful about, obviously, again, it's mathematical, that if your retention levels are lower for females in the business, then that number is going to have a downward pressure. So you have to look at that very, very carefully. And I think, creating a bit of buzz around the business, a bit of looking at the new technology, we're very lucky, to be honest, because, this whole digital wave, digital innovation has been really exciting. And creating ways that your workforce can think about adopting digital innovation within your business is really exciting. Because they feel they can change these businesses, or these businesses that we built up over many years, different policies, different processes, but they've got a real input in the future of the business.
Thank you. A couple of questions around the engagement of your senior leadership team. A few quite complimentary comments from the video that there seems to be that genuine buy-in. Any advice around really, getting that buy-in? Any learnings that there might have been some challenges along the way just around that senior leadership buy-in?
One, I would say I've got a great team, so it wasn't difficult. They get it. Two, I guess there's this thing called the leadership shadow. So you do try to create that. And if it is driven from the CEO, what's important for my boss is critical for me. That's an old rule. It hasn't changed. It never will, probably. So what's interesting for me it's fascinating for them. To be honest, I didn't have to convince them much. The statistics, the numbers, they're all there. And they're all data people, they're engineers, they understand what drives business, and they're looking to succeed, and so they see this as another way to succeed for the business.
Thank you. And we've got a number of people on the webinar from the Southeast Asian region, and obviously this being a sort of a global presentation, but are there any learnings that you're presenting probably more from an Australian context here, but particularly in some of those Southeast Asian areas that you service when you're pushing this gender diversity point?
I guess I could learn probably more from them. One thing that comes to mind straight away is that I feel like in Asia, this area of respect is more well-founded in many cases. Probably there's bigger issues with gender diversity, possibly, I'm not sure. But I think this area of respect is very strong in the Asian culture, and I would anchor onto that, because from that point of view, I think you've got a great opportunity and advantage over places like Australia. That level of basic respect that is shown in business in Asia is very, very strong. And I see that in a Japanese company all the time.
And final question for this evening, unless any last minute ones pop in. In terms of sort of, you've spoken a lot about the importance of this, but if you could pick a success or something that you're extremely proud of through the Say Again, is there one sort of final reflection on the success of the campaign that you'd like to make?
Right at the beginning, there was one, it comes from individuals, and there was a comment from one lady in our business who thanked her general manager, not me. She thanked her boss for this campaign because it's really changed her workplace. It's changed how she feels about coming to work. She feels safe. And I don't say that in a way that, anything was going to happen to her, but I feel it made her feel safe. It made her feel like she was included in the business. And so if I can change that with just a few people, then that one step at a time is going to make a difference. And I think that's what the Say Again campaign is all about.
Well, thank you. I think that's a fantastic message to leave it on in terms of small steps and look, just the comments that have come in for the questions. It's, again, just an incredibly powerful presentation. So on behalf of all of the international IQs, Sean, I want to thank you for that. This has been recorded. We're going to be making this available more broadly just to really push the message. But you should be extremely proud of what you're delivering at Komatsu. It's a very powerful message, and I've seen it before, but I got a lot from it tonight. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and thank you for recognising the importance of this through the award. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks. Cheers. Good night, everybody.
Good night.